All right, Adam, it is Friday, and the Buffs have wrapped up their 13th practice, so they are past the midway point, and we've got a couple days to kind of catch up on here because we didn't do this after Thursday's practice where we talked to Coach Durrell. Today, we were able to talk to Coach Brett Maxey, who I could listen to all day long. I mean, just great stories.
No doubt. And I love the combination of Brett Maxey and Demetrius Martin in that secondary coaching staff. Just kind of differing personalities. Brett Maxey will tell you stories and kind of speak deliberately, a little bit slower pace, where Demetrius Martin is high energy and a great recruiter, obviously. I think those guys play well together. And I think Carl Durrell found a couple good secondary coaches to lead this program.
Yeah, for sure. And we're going to get into that here in a little bit. I think we want to talk about tight ends. There's been, some news there, and then as well as the safety position and the DBs in general. But let's kind of start off with Coach Durrell, from yesterday. One of the big things, was Antonio Alfano, Adam, a guy that we get asked about all the time. And this is a kid that has not, had a chance to play yet or practice yet. Obviously, high-end transfer, 5-star transfer from Alabama, who people are excited about, but right now just not medically cleared to play. And so that's kind of the update. We get asked updates all the time, but right now there really is not a whole lot of updates. It's just he's not medically cleared right now.
And I feel like I'm part of the problem. Obviously, we hype up these recruits, and he was the number one recruit in the entire country in his class. So I get why people are interested, but we're trying to cover the team that's going to be on the field in 2020, right? And it's looking like Antonio Alfano is not going to be part of that plan. They've actually got quite a bit of depth and talent in that defensive line group. And, people are pressing for information on this. And, until I know we've both heard what's going on, but until Antonio Alfano is ready to come out and address it, I think it's best to just kind of let it run its course and wait for that time. I don't really understand why people need to know right now. And I get today's generation, you want to hear everything right away, but this is a topic that will come out eventually. But right now it's not important towards what CU's doing on the practice fields.
Yeah, and people want to know specifically what is the medical issue. Well, right now that doesn't matter, and there are HIPAA laws that, if these kids don't want this information out, then it doesn't need to get out. And frankly, we don't need to know it. You and I think, have both heard what's going on with him, but it's not our place to say. And, CU's not going to say right now. So all we can tell you is that there is something going on medically with him, that it's not at the point, like Coach Durrell said, where he can practice and play right now. And if that's the case, then that's the case. And, Adam, you hope that he can get back healthy and play this season. But, it's a 7-game season. I mean, this season is going to be over before we know it. And right now he's not cleared. It does sound like he's taking care of things in the classroom, which is great. He was having some issues, when he first got here the first semester. It sounds like things since the summer have really gone well for him in that regard. And so, when I've had a chance to talk to him, great young man, I hope the best for him. But it doesn't sound like right now, especially with a shortened season, that he's going to get on the field this year. And that's okay. There's no eligibility this year. Let's get him healthy, get him right, and look forward to another 5 years with him, or 4 years with him.
Yeah, like you said, credit to him for doing what he needs to do in the classroom right now to get himself back in the good graces of the football program. And I don't know about you, Brian, but when I was, in that 20-year-old range that Antonio Alfano is, I didn't always make the right decisions. And so he's taken, it sounds like, advantage of this opportunity to get things right in the classroom. And, with that said, when I see stuff about Antonio Alfano popping up in my notifications or the message board, I think I'm just going to kind of ignore it until we actually have another update to where he's back practicing, or, that he addresses the media.
Yeah, and frankly, we asked Coach Durrell yesterday. I asked him 2 weeks ago. I don't think we need to ask him much more than that. I mean, if there's an update that he wants to share with us, he will. But we'll ask every couple of weeks. And until then, keep reading me and Adam, because we'll let you know what's going on as much as we can. So, Adam, let's talk about some guys that are playing. Well, one guy that's not, actually. We're going to switch over to tight end. But, we were able to talk with Matt Lynch this week, and we want to talk about him. But also one guy that I know I personally was excited about seeing, the transfer from Arizona, Jake Peters. I learned this morning that, he's not going to play. He decided not to play football, and he's been practicing throughout the first week or so. but he decided not to play. And so I think kind of a big loss for CU as far as depth.
Yeah, Jake Peters, a three-star recruit coming out of high school, and just didn't fit the system there at Arizona. And I don't know what transpired to make him not think that he was fitting in here. But Matt Lynch is a very intelligent guy, a guy that's coming home. It's a real good feel-good story. And so I'm anxious to see him. I kind of got this sense from the interviews we've done this preseason that he's probably second in the pecking order at tight end right now.
That's what I think too. I mean, Taylor Embry said he's going to play a lot this year and that he feels like he's doing well in the run game. So that's great to see. I mean, he's only a second-year tight end. He's been a quarterback forever. And I thought it was interesting. I asked him, hey, this year doesn't count for eligibility. Would you come back next year? And he said, well, that kind of depends on how this season goes. So I think that if he has a good season and feels like he's playing a big role here, he would come back for a sixth year. And that would be huge for CU. Imagine having Brady Russell and Matt Lynch, if those are your two guys, for 2 years.
Yeah, and he's as you asked him about, he's the number one holder on the team as well, so he'll be out there on special teams for sure. And yeah, he was even getting praise from the strength coach staff this summer for just really standing out and having a great work ethic.
Yeah, so I'm excited about him. I think that he's one that was a good quarterback coming out of high school. Just didn't work out for him playing there at UCLA, but transitioned well to tight end. Caught a touchdown pass last year. It'd be nice to see him catch a few more. And obviously with that familiarity with Holder and also Chris Reinert, who's now handling special teams here at CU. He was at UCLA in 2018 when Matt Lynch was the holder there. So there's some familiarity there. So it sounds like they've got kind of a good rapport. I mentioned this before, but I ran into James Stefano a couple weeks ago. He mentioned Matt Lynch doing a great job as a holder because he knows that position. So it looks like that's going to be your holder right there is Matt Lynch.
And Chris Reinert has done a good job recruiting his first year in Boulder, got the number one kicker in the country, Josh Bryan, to commit, and one of the top 10 punters. So just talking to those two recruits that committed, a punter and a kicker, they talked about how much emphasis Carl Durrell and Coach Reinert, by extension, have been showing on the special team. So done a good job there as well.
Yeah, let's move over to the secondary because we've talked a lot about that. It seems like that's been a topic that's come up a lot in these first couple of weeks, and especially today because we were talking to Brett Maxey as well as KJ Trujillo. And let's start with safeties because it really sounds like from talking to Brett Maxey that it is Rakestraw and Mark Perry there at those top two spots. But Rakestraw's been out, we learned today, with a hamstring injury, and a guy that stepped up is Isaiah Lewis. And I was kind of surprised to hear him rave so much about Isaiah Lewis. That's not a knock on Lewis, just that I haven't heard that name throughout camp yet. And so to have Brett Maxey talk about him, I thought was encouraging. I mean, we see a lot of guys such as Akil Jones, who we also talked to today, that just kind of rise up a little bit later in their career. And maybe this is the time for Isaiah Lewis to do that.
Yeah, Isaiah Lewis has been kind of a forgotten man in that safeties group, and we haven't had a ton of opportunities to watch this team practice in person. Obviously, not at all this preseason, but Isaiah Lewis seemed to be in the area all the time, just was not quite able to close on some pass deflections, and that's understandable. He's an underclassman, right? I think sometimes the problem with CU's program in the last 10, 15 years is you're expecting these guys to have a huge role right away. And sometimes it takes a little bit of that seasoning. Darian Rakestraw is a good example of that. It took time for him to have progression. And now that he's been banged up this preseason, but he's kind of reached that next level that you expect a guy to late in his career. And so Isaiah Lewis, we shouldn't have forgotten about him, especially given how little depth they have at safety, but we kind of did. Right. And so it was also interesting, talking to him, Perry, who's moved to safety, to the back end of the safety position after playing star last year, and hearing how he has really great closing speed. And then he talked about Chris Miller as a guy that's really physical in there. And our big concern with Chris Miller, right, moving closer to the line of scrimmage is, can he stay healthy? But clearly he's not scared and not afraid of contact, which has made him a good fit in that role.
Yeah, and that's what you like to see, because I was worried about that with Chris is, would he be worried about that contact and trying to protect himself? But he doesn't seem to be worried about that. And obviously you hope he doesn't get hurt, but you can't play worried about getting hurt, and it sounds like he's not doing that. So that's great for the Buffs. And I thought, another interesting thing that came out of today, Adam, was KJ Trujillo talking about he's been playing some safety, which surprised me because not only is he small, but he was a starting corner for most of last year. But I got a couple things out of it. I'm interested to hear what you think. But for me, listening to Brett Maxey and listening to conversations we've had throughout camp, it sounds to me like what this move says to me is Christian Gonzalez is really stepping up at corner and might be a potential starter at corner, which is pushing a guy like KJ Trujillo to maybe play some other spots.
You try not to read too much into things like we talked about
Yeah.
on a different video, but I asked him about the true freshmen, and I mentioned Torrin Pittman and Will Angland, and the first person he mentioned out of that group is Christian Gonzalez. So that I feel like that tells you something. He talked about how he's 6'2" at the line of scrimmage, but he's 6'5" when he gets downfield because of his length. And so, I think this staff wants to go in most cases with the guys that know the system. And I think there is maybe one place where you try to work in that youth for the future. And it sounds like that place might be at cornerback with Christian Gonzalez.
Yeah, that's kind of what I got out of it. And more so, not really a knock on KJ or some of those other guys, but that Christian is really stepping up because we've heard his name a lot so far in camp. And, with KJ Trujillo, if he can provide some depth at safety and at corner, I think he's going to be on the field a lot. But I think it is interesting that, Christian Gonzalez, I think, is that freshman that I think we might see the most this year.
It's not a knock on KJ Trujillo that he's playing at both positions, but
Yeah.
It's kind of a knock on the previous staffs, right? If you're going to have two safeties and a star on the field, you need more bodies in that room. And I can't imagine what the reaction of Carl Durrell and Brett Maxey was when they took over and looked at what they inherited. In most spots for the Buffs, good depth, better situation than Carl Durrell's predecessors, but not at safety. And I never understood the numbers there. And you knew they were going to have to move some guys, and they've done that. But yeah, KJ Trujillo, he said he's 170 pounds. I don't think you really want to play safety in the Pac-12 at 170 pounds. He can probably do it, and be fine. But ideally, you'd like to have some bigger bodies that have, more experience on that back end. And so that's one of the big issues, I think, with the secondary is if they start having injuries there, you're going to have a true freshman like Torrin Pittman out there playing a lot of reps.
Yeah, and to your point, it's surprising that's a reflection of the previous two staffs because both those head coaches were defensive backs and defensive back coaches that you think that they would have really stockpiled that depth there, but didn't. And so, but it is interesting to see some new faces there, some guys that might step up this year that we're just not used to seeing more so than any other area. Not only Gonzalez, but Nigel Bethel has been talked about quite a bit. Torrin Pittman, it sounds like he's off to a good start with some depth at safety. So it's the secondary more than any other spot on the field, Adam, obviously other than quarterback, is going to look very different this year.
Yeah, in that group, if they play average level in terms of what you would expect out of a secondary in the Pac-12, I think this defense is going to be really good because you like what they have in the front seven. Carson Wells was banged up last year. Mustafa Johnson was injured pretty much all of conference play. So you'd expect they're going to get a little bit more pressure on the opposing quarterback. And if those secondary guys can just kind of grow and have this as a growing year and be serviceable, then I think this defense is going to be pretty good.
And then one last thing, we talked to Akil Jones, and he's got blonde hair now. Said it was paying homage to Rick Yamboa, who had the blonde hair. And I know some fans knocked on Rick Yamboa for his speed, but that guy was around the ball all the time, made a lot of tackles. It'd be nice to see Akil Jones have a Rick Yamboa type of season playing next to Nate Landman. I
think you could make an argument he was the most improved player on their defense, especially the second half of last year.
Yeah, I would agree.
He was a guy that was just finally healthy. That's all it took for Akil Jones. He was kind of snake bitten with the injury bug there for a while, and you saw him when he started getting that confidence. He was making a lot of plays right at the line of scrimmage, and so I'm excited to see him. John Van Diest obviously brings some depth there. Beyond those three guys, though, Nate Landman, Akil Jones, and John Van Diest, maybe another question mark on this defense.
Yeah, and one thing about Akil, I remember sitting with you at that open scrimmage early August last year, and Akil jogged off the field with the trainer with another injury, and we looked at each other, we're like, is he ever going to play? And we both said no. And by about week 2 or 3, there he was making impact plays and became a starter. So good for him. It's nice to see him have things click, and I'm excited about him because you're right. I think from day one to the end of the season, he was the most improved. But yeah, those guys got to stay healthy, those top 3 guys, because I'm excited about Marvin Ham. See what he can do, and he looks big in some of the videos and pictures I've seen. But you want those top 3 guys to stay healthy for sure.
Yeah, you got Quinn Perry there too. So
Yeah.
we'll see how they cultivate that depth. But I think there's a pretty clear pecking order there at that position.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And we're kind of running along here, but let's talk more this weekend. The Buffs have a scrimmage on Saturday, and obviously we won't be able to see it, but we'll see what we can get information wise out of that. But we'll come back this weekend and talk about that scrimmage.